Hi, this is Dr. Shubhendu Mujumdar, Assistant Professor in Zoology of Shibpur Dinobandhu Institution College. In this video lecture, I am going to explain natural selection, which is a very important concept of evolution. In the simplest way, we can describe natural selection as differential reproductive success. So, what is natural selection? Natural selection is the gradual process by which any heritable trait becomes established, or in other words becomes more or less common in a population due to pressures from the environment. Now, for natural selection to operate, it requires two very important things. First, there has to be variation in population to begin with. Any genetic variation in a population has to be manifested in terms of trait variation. Until and unless a genetic variation is externally expressed in the terms of trait variation, the natural selection or the environmental selection processes cannot operate upon it. And the second important thing is selection processes. As you can see in all these pictures, for these butterflies, these insects, or even of the pictures of these tigers, they all have very distinct variations, and this is very important. Now, the best examples of natural selection in modern days is the example of peppered moths. They are present in two different forms, the dark form and the light form. Before industrialization, the environment was cleaner, the tree barks were lighter in color and covered with lichens. So, it was easier for the lighter moths to camouflage easily, and the darker moths were easily spotted and predated by various insectivorous birds, thus keeping the population of darker moths, of peppered moths, very low. But with industrialization, large amount of carbon shoots came out in the environment from different factories which covered the trees, making them darker in appearance, and the lichens also disappeared from the tree trunks in such polluted environment. Now, in such changed environmental condition, the lighter moths were easily spotted and were heavily predated by several predatory birds. As you can see in these pictures, this is the situation before industrialization, and the tree trunks were much lighter in color, where it was easier for these lighter moths to sit and camouflage, whereas after industrialization, due to deposition of different carbon shoots, the tree trunks became darker. Now the situation reversed, and now it was easier for the darker moths to camouflage in this condition, and the lighter moths were easily spotted and predated. So, as a consequence of this industrialization, the number of lighter moths in the population of peppered moths gradually decreased, and the darker moths increased in number. This phenomenon is also known as industrial melanism. So, here the change environmental condition due to industrialization actually favored the darker moths, and they were selected by the nature. The forces operating for natural selection includes competition for prey or food. There are predatory pressures, parasitic load, competition for mate, which is in other words known as mate selection, then different climatic condition. Any individual or a particular trait giving advantage for an individual to survive in a change environmental condition which is helping the individual to capture prey in a more efficient way, to avoid the predators, to get rid of the parasitic load, or giving it the opportunity to select a more potential mate or a more fit in terms of fitness, a better mate, they are actually naturally selected. So, these are the forces for natural selection. Now, there are three types of natural selection. First, it's directional selection. It's a process of natural selection in which a single trait at one extreme of the phenotypic range is favored. It often happens when the environmental changes in a consistent way, as you have already seen in case of industrial melanism. The population trait shifts towards an extreme, like in that case it shifted towards the darker mobs. Then the second type is disruptive selection, a process of natural selection that favors both extreme traits of a phenotypic range. This results in divergence of a trait and often leads to speciation. And the third type of natural selection is stabilizing selection, which is a process of natural selection that tends to favor intermediate trait. It reduces phenotypic variations and removes extreme variations and maintains a status quo. Now, in directional selection, individuals that display a more extreme form of a trait have greater fitness than individuals with an average form of the trait. For example, the darker moths of the peppered moth population were selected during industrial revolution as the trees became darker and the lighter moths were easily spotted and eaten by the predatory or insectivorous birds. Same happens in case of camouflaging. Here this is an insect larva which is camouflaging a dead tree trunk. Now, the better it camouflages with this tree trunk, it increases its chances of survival. Now, if due to certain changes in the environment, if the pattern of this tree trunk changes, then it also will have to change, or rather the larvae which are better suited with that kind of a tree trunk will get the advantage. So, here this is the normal population, and with the change environmental condition, this new population mean, or this is changing in this direction. So, as it is changing, or in case of this moth, it is shifting the fitness of the selection of the trait is shifting from the lighter form to the darker form. So, that is why it is called as directional selection. Next is the stabilizing selection. In stabilizing selection, individuals with average form of a trait have the highest fitness. For instance, in case of magpie robin, a clutch of 4 eggs are the best, which is actually an intermediate trait. Why? Because if they lay too few eggs, none of the eggs might survive, or if they lay too many eggs, then after the youngs hatch from the eggs, then it will be very difficult for the parent birds to feed all the hatchlings, and eventually as a result none of them or very few of them will survive. So, in terms of the reproductive cost, it is best for the magpie robin to lay a clutch of 4 eggs, which is the best balance and hence selected by nature through stabilizing selection. The third type of natural selection is disruptive selection. In disruptive selection, individuals with either extreme variation of a trait have greater fitness than individuals with average form of a trait. This is just opposite to stabilizing selection. For instance, Samol males compete with each other to fertilize the eggs laid by the females. Now, the larger fish, this one, the larger fish have advantage because they are very strong, and the smaller fish also have an advantage of sneaking in and fertilizing the eggs without being noticed while the larger males are busy fighting with each other. But the fishes, this one with a medium body size, is neither able to fight with the larger bodied males and win, nor they are able to sneak in and stealthily fertilize the eggs like the smaller fishes. Thus, in this case, two extreme variations, that is a small bodied fish and the large bodied fish, are being selected through disruptive selection. This disruptive selection often leads to large amount of variation and moves towards speciation. Thank you all for watching this episode of natural selection. Hope this was helpful for you. Thank you.